Captain Sarah from the Salvation Army Adelaide Congress Hall, and I'm going to share a bit with you about the discipleship experiment we're working on, particularly the passage we're looking at this week, Mark chapter 16, verses 9 to 20. Now, we don't know who's watching these, why they're watching these, or what are you getting out of these videos, but we really want to, at this time, as a congregation, to be able to be growing the tools and equipping our disciples to be able to grow and to seek and to explore and to ask questions and to grow in their faith, even though we can't meet together on a Sunday morning. And we've been doing that by exploring how Jesus did this with his disciples after the events of Easter. We have these disciples that gather throughout the rest of the book in fear, in worry, in doubt, in hiding, and Jesus appears to them. And the beginning of these verses in Mark chapter 16 verse 9 is a little bit of a recap of those where he appears to people. And then Jesus tells them off for their unbelief. He actually says, "You have hardened hearts." And then he talks to them more and actually sends them off and says, "This is what you're going to do when you believe." And in the last verse, we have the ascension where he disappears up to be in heaven. And the disciples, the wonderful guys that they are with all this unbelief, they actually went off and did these things. It says that they performed the miracles. They healed people. They did amazing things in Jesus' name. They picked up snakes. I don't know why you'd be doing that, but that's what they did. And they were not hurt. Good on them. I ain't touching any snakes. But in my last video where I was sharing about this, I really got struck by the fact that the security blanket of Jesus' physical presence had been taken away. And rather than throw a tanty, they went out and they trusted, and they did. And the world has been changed since then. The rest of the Bible and our church history we have today is proof that their belief changed the world. So I just wanted to share a little bit from what we've learned and what I've learned through this passage, because I shared about those security blankets for me are things like my uniform, my job, and Sunday church. And I've been talking to a lot of people that Sunday church is one of those things that made it easier to share their faith and be a Christian. But there's been such amazing stories being shared about people who have been just encouraged and blessed by being and preaching the word of gospel wherever they are. We have people giving gifts to their neighbours that they hadn't ever met before, and then receiving gifts back and creating great relationships, new relationships. We've got people from this church calling each other and really getting to know each other on a much deeper level than they ever could over 5 minutes and a cup of tea on a Sunday. We've had people at the supermarket helping the elderly shop and do their groceries, particularly when there was that first lot of panic when all this world changed. The kids from our church have been surprising some of our members by writing letters, actual letters that are posted to their house of encouragement, and just hearing some of the stories from the people receiving those going, I'm just touched that they thought of me and they wanted to encourage me. It's a beautiful thing. And we had a chat this week to an elderly gentleman who at first really struggled that we weren't meeting on a Sunday. It had been part of his tradition for decades. It's part of his Sunday life. And he really struggled. And then he shared with us what he's filled that time with. And I just wanted to share it with everybody because it's really, really, really beautiful. He has a friend who owns a car sale yard. And this car sale yard is about an hour or so away from his house. But every Sunday morning, this man now rides his mobility scooter for an hour along footpaths to go and be with his friend who's had a hard time through COVID in sales. And he sits with his friend, he gives his friend a lunch break, he gives his friend company, and he spends time with him, and then he rides his mobility scooter back home. He's being really practical in the way that he's sharing the love of Jesus, and this man cannot stop but talk about Jesus everywhere he goes. He is being the hands and feet of Jesus to someone who is in need, and it's just lovely. And it was really encouraging and a blessing to us to hear of the way that this church is preaching the gospel to all creation, even if we can't meet together on a Sunday. And we had a beautiful opportunity on Sunday, this past Sunday, of having 40 people go through our building for 12 hours of prayer, to open our building to pray for the past, the present, and the future, and seek God's will through all of that. A day like that would have not have been possible if we were meeting for church during that time. God is doing amazing things as people are using creative ways to connect with Him, to preach the gospel, to say goodbye to some of those security blankets and see what God is going to do in and through this new time, encouraging us growing us, empowering us to preach his name as we continue to trust him and grow with him. When church actually comes back together and we meet together as a community, there's going to be amazing stories of testimony, of faith, of growth, of challenge, of failures. And God, it was just going to be evident through it all that he is not done with his church here in the world, in Adelaide and the city salvos. So as we continue to prepare for Pentecost, our next passage we're looking at is Acts chapter 1, verses 12 to 26, where we put a good team together before the Acts of Pentecost. So I encourage you that you read this chapter, Acts 1, 12 to 26. See what God's trying to tell you in it, see what he's telling them, see what we can learn today and what we can put in place. Shane will talk about that a little bit more in his video on Friday. But until then, I just say thank you and keep the stories coming. Keep encouraging each other with the amazing things he's doing in and through you. May God continue to bless his army here in Adelaide and you individually as you seek him and trust him in all you do. Have a great week.